Thank you for staying with us in early exchange. Now moving to the conversation this morning on climate risk reporting. Yes, it's important to know that climate change poses significant risk to businesses, including banks. The IASB is advocating for clearer and accurate reporting so that the financial reports can contain all of this for investors and even business owners to be aware of the risk that the climate change pose to their business. Joining the conversation this morning virtually is Semiye Michael, who is a climate change expert and is also the executive director, Dean Initiative, which is a youth-led nonprofit organization passionate about promoting good governance, inclusion, sustainability, and youth leadership. Good morning, Semiye.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Moving to the business of the day, talking about climate change risk. Before we get to the risk and then the financial reporting of this risk, let's look at how much of climate change activities is ongoing globally and how it affects different regions of the world, particularly Africa.
Globally, it is obvious we are confronting a very huge gap, both in our action and in response to climate crisis, and that has always caused a level of agitation.
Also, Semiye, as we were talking about before the break, we're looking at climate change activities and how it's impacting businesses globally, particularly in Africa. Could you tell us what the situation is currently globally?
So let's bring the context back home. The global effect is not as much as what we should look at in our own local corridor. And bringing banking, into this is very, very interesting because one big issue about our banking sector in Nigeria is where their interest lies. And it's a huge disappointment over the years that our banking system in Nigeria is solely about profit for some set of people within the banking industry. And recently we have seen with the Otedola article where he pointed out directly how much our banking industry spent on luxury private jets, over $500 million private jet purchase, and even higher amount in maintenance of this kind of luxury for just a few set of people within the banking industry, and losing sight on some of the most important components of human development and social capital building, which one of them is critically, around the climate issue. So our bank will not efficiently participate in this climate reporting system because they do not even have interest in those areas due to the risks associated with it. It doesn't serve their immediate, human gratification. It doesn't service their immediate luxury, desire. And so they will continue to shy away from taking huge responsibility. And even when they are trying to do, you will smell a lot of foul because they are not going to be sincere. They've not been proactive. They've not been engaging, and they've not been innovative in addressing issues relating to climate, reality. They attend global meetings and conferences and also pretentiously sign into some of these deals. But when we come back home, they do not engage with, entrepreneurs, business activities that are aiming towards alleviating or adapting or mitigating climate situations. I don't know if you might want to interject or I should just continue.
All right, permit me to come in now since you've set the pace now. The issue here being raised by the International Accounting Standard Board has to do with financial reporting when it comes to climate risk and financing. I would like you to identify some of these issues contending with financial reporting as regards climate change, the issue of climate change in Africa, and also the issue of climate financing. From your
So the big deal is even the fact that what are you reporting when your activities does not actually support
the right financing to tackle the issue of climate change in Africa?
Yeah, I was just saying that what actually will you be reporting when in actual sense you are not even investing directly into the needs gaps of the climate issue reality. You know, the bank's financial reporting on climate change is crucial for assessing their exposure to climate related risk and opportunities. You know, and these are some of the key aspects that should bank actually be investing to the point that we are going to be able to hold them accountable onto their reporting. These are some of the key areas that we will be discussing in that regard, and that has to do with climate-related risk, disclosures, where banks should be able to disclose their exposure to physical and transition risk, such as the extreme weather events that we both are experiencing, the carbon prices and the changes in regulations. We also should be looking at the area of the green gas emissions, where banks should be able to report their own green gas emissions and those of their lending and investment portfolios. We don't have much of this in Nigeria, because even in Africa, because our banks are so, kind of self-centered that they just serve their immediate needs. We ought to be looking at climate-related asset exposures, where banks should be able to disclose their exposures to assets vulnerable to climate change, such as fossil fuel reserves, real estate in flood-prone areas, or agricultural, loans, climate risk management, where banks should be able to describe, their climate risk management practices, including risk assessment, mitigation strategies, scenarios, and analysis. Are we talking about low carbon financing? How much is bank in Nigeria putting into low carbon financing? Banks should be able to report their low carbon financing activity, such as renewable energy projects finance. How many of the banks in Nigeria do we currently have putting their financing project on renewable energy in the public, the green bonds, sustainable infrastructure investment? We don't have much of our bank, shouldering some of these responsibilities that critically affect our climate-related issues in Nigeria.
All right, you've mentioned a lot of areas that banks could have exposure to climate change risk. Now, let's look at quantifying this exposure and actually reporting it. Is there a challenge with quantifying the risk? Aside the area of the fossil fuel issue, which countries are moving away from because there's advocacy for low carbon economy. When you talk about risk associated with the agriculture sector and others, is there a challenge quantifying the risk?
There's no challenge quantifying the risk, because for every investment, the back channel energy to ensure that you assess the level of risk associated with your investment is critical to you investing in the first instance. These guys invest in real estate, for example, in Nigeria, because they have seen that the interest of the people in Nigeria, especially people in the political sector, align greatly. Stolen funds are easily stacked up in property, acquisition and things like that, which mostly are not even designed environmental friendly. But this guy yet still put a lot of resources and quantify their risk and assess them, and also track these risks along the line. It's the point is, if they showed energy and interest in ensuring, because investing in greenhouse, fossil fuel, agricultural, stuff are critically long-term business deals that will not bring the kind of immediate returns that the kind of business the banks do in Nigeria bring. And that's why they're going to continue to bring excuses in the areas of, oh yeah, quantifying this risk is difficult. Oh yeah, we will not be able to track the people because most of the people that are working in this sector are semi-literate, or most times informal, set of people. But yet, if we're building a nation, if we're going to be accountable and transparent in our investment deal, especially in the banking sector, we must find a way to work with this sector because these are the real deal. The few people who are very educated and rich and powerful within the agricultural sector do not do the big portion of what is affecting, our climate issue. One of the critical areas for us as climate organizers is the fact that participatory actions at the community level is key towards achieving the long-term goal we are driving at climate, change quest.
All right, interesting. Now, globally, investors are raising concerns as regards climate risk reporting and the need for banks to make this disclosure. But why do you think banks may shy away from, disclosing this risk in their financial statement? What are the challenges on the part of the banks?
Interest, for me, is the underlying factor is interest, and the kind of greed and selfishness it will expose in the part of the banks administrators and leadership. Climate crisis is human, is a human disaster centered. Okay, it is the climate issue. Investors, financial organizations, and agencies globally that are investing in climate, related issues, and not just profit, focused organizations. They're not just profit-focused organizations. And when we have banks or financial institutions that are bent on making profit at all costs, you're going to have challenge in their intention towards investing in climate related areas. And when there are underlying factors, especially that has to do with satisfying people's, greed level, we are not going to have the courage to wanting to come out to declare or to report. There's going to be a lot of inconsistencies in our figures at the end of the day. No matter how we manage those figures, intentions will be underlined. We will see elements of greed. We will see disconnections. When those intentions are not properly managed, why do you think globally as climate activists storm business sessions, storms annual general meeting of financial institutions, pull them, cause a lot of protests in their meetings? Because the intentions of most of these financial and business organizations are not for, humanitarian, salvage. These people are carrying away with, selfishness, greed. And when businesses just want to make money and saving the planet is not their primary objective, we're not going to be able to have to speak about reporting that will be transparent and accountable.
Now, talking about reporting that will be transparent, accurate, that will also help investors, could there also be the challenge of data availability for the banks? Do the banks have access to data in every area that within they operate and supposed to provide information? Take, for instance, Africa and Nigeria. Do we even have the data on the effect of climate change on our environment?
So let's also be sincere with ourselves. Banks are making a lot of money in this country, a lot of money. And what other institutions should actually be funding activities around quality data access and management in Nigeria, if not institutions like banks? In other parts of the world, it's development ratios, development issues, capitally intensive development activities are not only funded by government. We have places in the world where the health sectors are funded by private sectors on research, level, implementation level. We have places in the world where financial institutions finance and, heavily finance issues around data management and security. What are our banks doing in Nigeria, in Africa, for example? These guys just sit back, allow people to go and, stress themselves out and come up with unprofessional, unrealistic data that are not well sourced because they have limited resources, capabilities to, to source for those data, where the banks have the opportunity, they have the wherewithal, they have the expertise, they have the resources, but no, they will not do that because the interest of their investment does not empower the society to thrive in areas where they should be thriving. So in which area of Nigerian sector do we even have reliable data? We've been having inconsistent data in education. We've been having inconsistent data in livelihood. Even the National Social Register that was so much, talked about, at the end of the day, it was inconsistent until and the government had to throw it away. So we have to hold some of these sectors responsible for the failures we see that they themselves are now using as excuse why they don't want to, plunge themselves into it. If you want to do a sustainable business, if you are serious about the reality of what you want to confront as an institution, what stops you from funding? You have the resources. What stops you from funding those, the primary element that will allow you to achieve success in that area? But they won't. They will not do it. So back to your question, I'm not surprised that we may not have the type of data that we need, because the type of institutions and organizations that will put resources in place to make those data available, they are shedding away from it, and they're not taking those responsibilities, which is unfortunate.
Let me reiterate what the question I asked earlier, which is for you to talk about the role of banks, private sectors, and by extension, the government as regards raising the right financing to tackle the issue of climate change in Nigeria. It's been estimated that Nigeria needs a sum of 10 billion naira annually to fund SDG goals. Your reaction to this? All right. It seems as if Semiye is not ready for us. The internet is playing fast one on us. All right. Now, the issue here is talking about sustainable development goals, the issue of finance is crucial. Then another thing which is also crucial is the issue of knowledge and capacity, building the right knowledge. There are targets being set as regards goal 13, which has to do with climate change. And one of the targets is to ensure that globally you build the capacity for knowledge and understanding as regards climate change. Now, if you look at what is playing out in other climate, you observe that there are right investment when it comes to having the right information, having the right data to drive the capacity for understanding and providing the right information for people to have what we call public awareness when it comes to climate change. But if you flip the coin back to our climb here, it's the reverse is the case, because you don't even have the right data as regards, which was a question you asked earlier, as regards the impact of climate change on the environment. Nationwide, Nigeria is dealing with the issue of data, having a centralized form of data. Now, when you talk about the issue of climate change, that's a reflection of that, because you can't shy away from the reality in the society. Yes, there are researchers who are doing research in this area. There are investors who are looking at these figures, which is also part of the concerns raised by some of these investors, which an International Accounting Standard Board referred to. And to avoid what you call investors' apathy, which is why this board is raising this concern, because the investors are asking the questions. If this information are not available, you have banks disclosing their financial statements, you have details being stated at the end of the year, their financial report year. But when it comes to the risk associated with climate change and the financing, banks are not forthcoming. So the investors are having these concerns that if these things are not being released or standardized, yes, they might have to withdraw their money. And that's why this conversation is important. So same thing is playing out. When you don't have the right data and you have what you call disaggregated information, which is also part of the challenge when it comes to Africa. So the issue of knowledge is also important because that's the starting point. You have to provide the right information to educate people. And the question I ask is, if you ask an average African or Nigerian, how much of understanding do they have when it comes to the issue of climate change and the impact of the society? That's, I could see you're smiling.
You
Because,
know, when they say you're asking John question in Nigeria, that's it.
it's a reality. And I think conscious effort has to be made to ensure that the public awareness is scaled up for people to understand. And it starts from creating the right information. But the issue is, who are the people that will create the right capacity when it comes to knowledge and information, which is where the issue of training comes in. Another target, as regards the SDG goal number 13, is the issue of building policies around climate change. And Nigeria has policies as regards the issue of climate change, but the question is the level of awareness. Are people aware of these policies? It is one thing to have laws or regulation or policies, like we often say that in Nigeria it's not the absence of laws or policies,
implementation.
but it's just the implementation. And even it's not just the implementation alone, the awareness about these things. These laws could coexist in books, but in reality, do Nigerians know about these laws, this regulatory framework, this policy? So these are part of the concerns being raised by this agency, and I hope these things could be addressed shortly.
To the policy, before we get back to our guest shortly, it's also about the intentionality of the policy. It seemed like a blanket policy is what we have. Oh, let's address climate change. Let's attend to the issues of climate change. But also, do we separate the issues so that we're focused? Are we attending, what part of the policy is attending to climate change adaptation? What part of the policies are attending to climate change mitigation? Well, we'll get to that when we after we get Semiye's last thought on these issues. All right, Semiye. Now, looking forward regarding what Nigeria should do to attend to the issues of climate change and for companies and banks to capture the risk of climate change in their financial report, in their assessments. What should be done?
Thank you, and sorry for this whole network issue. One of the things that we are facing as a people is the fact that both the government and the business people, the private sector, do not see the need to, to be dear to people, and we can't even hold them accountable. Since the protests have begun, for example, you see the mess that citizens have experienced in internet and data connectivity. The government has not taken responsibility, the network provider has not taken responsibility, and nobody has been held accountable for that. The people are less important to them. But by the way, we were in a climate workshop, I think a few weeks ago, and we were looking at some of the estimates in regard to finance, requirements to actually deal with the issue of climate change. And we had to categorize in their orders the mitigation, finance need, the adaptation, the loss and damages, the resilience and adaptation planning and technology. And in renewable energy, we're talking, under mitigation, renewable energy, we're talking of between $10 to $15 billion, energy efficiency, $5 to $10 billion, transportation, $5 to $10 billion, industry, $2 to $5 billion. Under adaptation, we're looking at agriculture, $2 to $5 billion, water resources, $1 to $3 billion, coastal protection, $1 to $3 billion, and health, about $500 million to $2 billion. In loss and damage, we're looking about $1 to $2 billion as an estimated annual cost of climate-related disasters. And we're looking at under climate resilience and adaptation planning, we're also looking at about $500 million to $1 billion. Technology transfer and capacity building, which I also had you mention, training. We're looking at $200 million to $500 million US dollars. These are estimated requirements between $30 to $60 billion and that are estimated. Where are we going to see this money? we have the international climate finance that each country are plugging into, and they are securing resources, government budgetary allocations, yeah, which we have the power to determine and allocate what we think we need based on our projection and the income realities. The private sector, where this issue of banking people even come to play, which they are not doing, and the few that are doing it, they are also not doing it intentionally enough. The green bonds and climate team financing instruments, these are global instruments that we can secure resources, multilateral and bilateral development partners. We have the UN and international partners in most of the countries. We have them heavily in Nigeria. Harnessing the resources related to climate funding is also, an opportunity, and carbon pricing and the market mechanism. How do we hold the people responsible for this whole sector accountable to ensure that whatever is budgeted, whatever we plan is actually made available and used for the people? One important thing I saw you mention is, the area of knowledge and capacity building. Yeah, we've always assumed on behalf of the people we are leading, without knowing that there's no how we can make sustainable impact without participatory designing and programming. One of the key things we do in our own organization is a community climate resilience, education, where we had to work with community people, mobilize them, ask them questions that will make them come to terms with the reality of climate activities, and begin to introduce them to activities that will make them co-implementer of both mitigation and adaptation activities. We're having a lot of food shortages now in the country as a result of some underlying factors that we do not even trace to, climate actions. And the people, the farmers who are the majority, but who are not learned, are not empowered to know some of these things. And some of these things can be averted or controlled or managed, but nobody is investing in the area of community education around climate, actions and activities. So it's time to hold ourselves accountable. It's time for government to know that you don't get to government and start complaining about what it is or what it's not. If you are not ready, don't go in, because government is about solving people's problem. It's not about complaining about the problem that is on your table. So people get to government and start realizing that the problem is much more than they thought of. Fuck off. You don't need to be there. The idea is you get there to solve problem. There's no amount of problem you get to when you get to the office and you now get disappointed. How dare you? It can be really hungering when you see the way the people in government manage the situations that they are supposed to efficiently prepare for, building the right team, bringing the people who will not, be motivated by resources or be motivated by opportunities or by gain. So these are some of the challenges we have. But on a final note, we will all be fine at the end of the day. I just hope that we know what we're doing and we take actions in good time. Thank you so much.
Semiye, we understand your passion towards climate change issues. That's why you're a climate change activist. But you must understand that there are certain words that are not airworthy. They are called NTBB, not to be broadcasted. And you just use one of them, the F word. So I'd like you to please apologize for using that, because that comes off as offensive to some audience and is not to be
those
used.
words, and it's okay. And funny enough, I'm also a semi-clergyman. I'm not supposed to be saying things that are not airworthy, but at times you just get angry. I hope it's pardonable. I'm sorry about that.
Semiye Michael, climate change activist, for your thoughts on climate change. Reporting is advocated for by the International Account Standard Board for banks and companies. All right, before we bring the conversation on this to a close. Earlier, I was talking about our policies addressing the issues as they are, being intentional about them, climate change adaptation and mitigation. So if we have to segment it, then it has to be done intentionally. What policies are we making around adaptation? And that is dealing with already existing problems. We're saying, oh, from this time to this time, this is what we'll do regarding building seawalls, constructing drains to attend to flood issues. These are the policies on urban development, so people do not build where they're not supposed to build to further compound the problems of climate change. In terms of mitigation, what is the policy? What is the incentive to businesses that may want to help to reduce or prevent the problem from getting worse, such as energy transition, renewable energy that we're talking about, reduction of greenhouse emissions, actually ensuring that there is reforestation and not deforestation. So except we become that intentional, it'll just be like you doing things randomly. So to avoid that random approach, which will not need much effort, we'll have to be intentional about it. And it also comes down to the companies and the banks in the reporting when there is segmentation of this. So we know what bank attends to this, and then in the capturing of the climate change risk, it then reflects, oh, in this particular area, they're more prone to climate change issues. And so you have more problem. So more funds may need to be committed in this area in terms of adaptation. It also reflects in this area, if you operate in the Western world, for instance, or in the Western climate, you know that there is low tolerance for the use of fossil fuel cars because the electric vehicles are coming up now. So you may need to invest in this. If you've already invested much in some investment around that, you may need to begin to divest so that you do not run at a loss. These are things I think need to be considered so that we can have accurate reporting that also help investors in making their decisions. But as a country, there is more that needs to be done in terms of how intentional we are.
Yes, I agree with you. And that's why the federal government recently talked about the CNG initiative, which is also part of provisions to achieving this target and also reduce the impact.
But CNG is also fossil fuel.
But the point is, like you said, having the right investment, which is what the federal government has set aside funds for this kind of initiative. But most importantly, I think we need to be also proactive as regards our policies. The right budgeting for issue of climate change. I think there's a need to also improve on that. Because annually, if you don't approach this thing annually, we just have 6 years away to 2030. So it means that we'll have to be more strategic than ever. We don't have to wait till we need external funding and external help. Most of the time, the challenge is we leave these things to people who are external agencies for them to come up with the right framework and policies. But here are issues we deal with in our environment, which are very peculiar to us. We understand the environment and our peculiarity. So there's a need to localize this kind of war against the issue of tackling climate change so that it becomes relevant to an average person in Nigeria. And when you need to localize it, the use of the language also, it's important in the campaign or the orientation or in the education. By the time you use these policies, you make them available in local languages, in Hausa, in Yoruba, in Igbo. It's easier for people to relate.
Pidgin.
In Pidgin, that creates sense of belonging. And it becomes a song and also thing where everybody sees the need to be part of this initiative. So which is where the issue of public awareness is very crucial. For me, I think that's the starting point. Every other thing will fall in place as regards framework, investment. Then also there's a need to create the right business environment for the right investment. Investors will invest when they know, okay, the part will occur likely on the society. But in our society, if you don't have the right framework, the right data, it will lead to what we call investors' apathy, which is what is playing out now. The risk managers and banks would prefer to invest in other things rather than invest in the issue of climate change because of the risk factors and because of the peculiarity of the environment, certain things that are not predictable, certain things that you don't have control over.
So it makes it seem like a more high-risk venture.
Your high-risk venture, even though in recent, the higher the risk, This it should be
the higher the return.
But somehow here, it could be the reverse in the case when it comes to this particular subject. And that's why these risk managers in banks are raising concerns on the need to have the proper framework. And if all those things are done, which is what International Accounting Standard Board is making reference to, create that right of environment, then investors will be able to invest in this kind of initiative.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.